Hey guys, this is MG from mgcovers.com, and today we're going to answer the question, what is the easiest sport to handicap? Take a guess. It's not football, and it's also not the sport that many claim to be the easiest sport to handicap, which is baseball. So stay tuned and let's find out what sport it is and why. So in order to identify what the easiest sport is to handicap, we first need to identify what is the most difficult sport to handicap. And the majority of us watching this video, we already know this. The most difficult sport to handicap is football. Now, you only have 16 games that are played in the NFL each week for a season total of 272. College football would be even less. With very few games being played, you can't produce a representative sample to accurately predict an outcome. For example, during week 3 of the NFL, you literally only have 2 games of stats to create a line that is better than the general public and the odds makers. Most games end in 3 and 7 margin more than any other numbers, and the majority of lines are between 2 and 8. And this we know as well. Most teams in the NFL win by a field goal or a touchdown. The typical score might be 23-20, or you'll see 21-28 a lot of times. So in essence, there is a tighter margin of competition in football than any other sport. That also means it's extremely difficult to handicap, to try to find an edge, and even more difficult to win. And finally, the $95 billion are wagered on football out of $150 billion wagered on all of sports each year. So 60% of all the money being wagered on sports is wagered on football. And of course, the odds maker know this, and that's why they spend a lot of time creating the best possible line that they can. So now that we've identified the most difficult sport to handicap, let's next identify what the easiest sport is to handicap. College basketball. There are 353 D1 basketball schools that play an average of 30 games a year for a season total of 10,590 games. That is a lot of basketball games. And a lot of people watching this video say, well, there's a lot of games played in baseball. That's true, and it's a great sport to handicap as well, but you're only talking about maybe, I think it's 4,800 games that are played in baseball each year, so twice that many in college basketball. And so it really comes down to the law of averages. If you have 10,590 games to create a line for, there is going to be a bigger margin of error in those games as compared to football, which only has 272 games. Now, this is really interesting. People don't realize this. Approximately 150 games of college basketball are played each Saturday. That's a lot of basketball games. And what this does, and I mentioned this earlier, this forces the odds maker to create a line for every game. And since games are played each day, they really don't have time. They're not producing a line for Saturday's game on Tuesday. So the lines for the next day generally come out overnight or generally real early in the morning. And because of that, you can often find errors in the lines or actually gain an edge over the general public and the odds maker as well. And this is really interesting. The competition difference between top and bottom teams, the competitive difference between top and bottom teams is greater in college basketball than any other sport. And what that means is, say during November of college basketball season, you often see, out of conference games. You might have an SEC team play a team from the Big South. And one angle that you can take from that is a lot of times the sports book, they'll overcompensate. It's also referred to as shading the line. I'll give you a specific example. Earlier in the year, South Carolina played Stony Brook. It was, I think, the second or third game of the season. Well, Stony Brook was a pretty good team, but they had to create the line to even the action. So what they did was, it was South Carolina minus 14. Well, of course, we played Stony Brook, but not only did Stony Brook cover it, but they also won the game. So it's a really good angle to look at when you're wagering. So next, let's look at some real-life examples. First, you'll see these are my numbers for the NFL for this past season, even though we have the AFC-NFC championship game today. Now, you look where I have that circled. We played a total of 22 games, which is not a lot of games. Ended up 15-7 with 8.4 units. So we actually had a winning season. Now, we do not play NFL the traditional way, and that's because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, because it is extremely difficult to produce a profit, to produce positive numbers, and to win in NFL. So what we do is we play 2-team 6-point teasers. Now, so and by doing that, we just don't have a lot of games to wager on. Okay, so let's go next to the NHL. Now, NHL produces a lot of games, but it is probably the most difficult sport to handicap. And you can look down, we'll come back to this. Look what I have circled there. We're 67 and 60. Looks like I got that through 117, and we're up 23.2 units. Now, we'll go to my season total for NCAA basketball. And this is interesting because look at 118. I got that circled. We're 38 and 23, and we're up 13.7 units. So if you compare that to where we finished in NFL, we're already up more units in NCAA basketball. We have a couple months to go, and we only ended up with 8.4 units for an NFL. So that just really just goes to show you how profitable the NCAA basketball can be. Now, I do want to cover one quick thing as we wrap this up. If you start wagering on NCAA basketball, again, you first have to have a stat model that is better than the stat model for the sports book or even the general public. And to give you just a slight advantage, just like a lot of sports, the general public in college basketball will play favorites and they will play overs. So what happens is the sports book, they will shade the line that way. So a lot of times, one good strategy you can do, let's say a team is a favorite, say it's Duke, and they're playing another good team. Well, the sports book understands that the general public will probably bet on Duke, so that line is sort of inflated. And if Duke is playing a good team, you can take advantage of that by playing the underdog. So you might want to try that strategy out just to kind of start when you're experimenting, getting started in college basketball. If you like the video, click like, subscribe for more content. And if you'd like some free plays, head on over to our website at mgcovers.com.